Good morning, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with one last look at Matthew before it moves on out into the Atlantic and dwindles away, getting caught up in the energy out here. What a legacy this has left from the Eastern Caribbean, where it formed into a tropical storm, through Haiti, a little bit in Jamaica, certainly Eastern Cuba, up through the Bahamas, and then you know the rest, and the story is still being written as this affected eastern Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and southeast Virginia. As of the 11 o'clock advisory, of course, Matthew is now what we call post-tropical. It has gone through its tropical phase with warm core characteristics now being replaced with a more what we call baroclinic look to it. It's sort of a transitioning system into a large ocean storm as opposed to a compact hurricane like we saw as a great example off the coast of Florida as it was headed towards the northwest Bahamas. That was rather amazing what it did there. And we'll talk about all of the history that this made in a later update, maybe even a documentary that I can put together and post sometime down the road. But for today, the good news here, Matthew finally moving away. Still some strong north winds coming across the Outer Banks out here, creating sound-side surge flooding along the Pamlico Sound, and that will be fairly quickly to abate as this moves out. Also moving fairly brisk, east-northeast at 14, so, you know, in 3 hours it'll be close to 60 miles away or so, 45 to 60 miles away, because it's going to accelerate, so that's good news there. This is the satellite picture, the visible satellite. And let me update this to see if I can add a couple more frames to it. And you notice, again, it has sort of that nor'easter look to it. Almost has frontal characteristics down here and the center of circulation embedded in here. And so it's that post-tropical characteristic or structure of the system. No longer looks like a hurricane. So, boy, though, what a legacy this left here. Really unbelievable. Tragically, we have loss of life in the United States and even more significant loss of life in Haiti. I have not heard about Cuba, but this is certainly one that will be retired. This will be the last time we have to deal with the name Matthew. It'll most certainly be retired off the list of names and replaced with another male name soon enough. And so in 6 years, 2022, whatever replaces Matthew, we'll see what it does, right? Matthew, by the way, replaced Mitch from 1998, which was very devastating in Central America. Now we have to watch Nicole. No worry whatsoever for the eastern United States, but Bermuda should keep an eye on Nicole. The forecast track for that is for it to become a hurricane again by Wednesday here, and then move close to Bermuda, which is right there. Hopefully this will fade off to the east of Bermuda even more, and we can see a track like that. What we don't want to see is it to come right up over just to the northwest of Bermuda. The eye passing over a location sometimes isn't the worst case scenario. Usually it's just to the right of where the eye makes landfall that you have the biggest storm surge threat and the strongest winds in that right front quadrant, but it's a very small area depending on the hurricane. And so the eye coming over you is not always the worst case scenario unless it is an extremely well-defined hurricane like Andrew was in 1992, where it has almost a perfect eye wall. So we'll keep an eye on these trends for Bermuda. Looking at the latest GFS from this morning's run, just going to put this into motion. You see the energy with Matthew up here looks very different than it did before. It's no longer a ball of energy, but it's caught in the trough energy, that baroclinic process that I talked about. And then there's Nicole, still looks like a ball of energy at the 500 millibar level. And there, folks, is Bermuda right there. And you notice on this morning's run of the GFS, the very early morning, 6Z, this does pass to the east of Bermuda, kind of starts and stops and starts and stops. This will become a hurricane again. And for those of you that keep track of the seasonal ACE score, that's how the season did as a whole. It's kind of looking at a basketball team and what their average score throughout the season is, okay? And the higher their average score, usually the better they do. And for the Atlantic Basin, the ACE score, I haven't looked at it yet, but we are going to be probably considerably above normal when the season is all said and done. It will have turned out to be a busier season than most people were forecasting. Probably right in line with those who gave a range, and that's how ranges can be very effective. But if you draw a line in the sand, like Colorado State, Phil Klotzbach, even this could exceed that just a little bit. But you know what? Again, that's all academic, technical stuff. We want to know about the impacts, and at least from Nicole, you got to watch in Bermuda for the next few days. Now, speaking of impacts, this is gold right here. A colleague of mine found this and shared it with me. FEMA operations briefing, and it gives you the summary of what's happening with Matthew here and other significant weather across the globe. I guess really United States interest, but here's Matthew, and they have a weather forecast, precipitation forecast, etc. And then here's the rainfall over the past 24 hours. Extremely heavy rain in southeast Virginia. A few pockets here of unbelievable heavy rain, more than 14 inches across a good deal of North Carolina here, and then a lot of heavy rain down near the South Carolina-Georgia border. I drove through pretty much all of this, and I have never seen that much rain for that long a period of time. I've driven through heavier rain in short periods, but this was the most rain where it was just the volume of rain was up for the longest amount of time in the 21 years that I've been doing this, and that is no exaggeration. So the river flooding is where I'm going to focus now. The pink areas are major forecast flood points for the rivers in the Carolinas and southeast Virginia. And just to give you an example, Tar River at Greenville, luckily it doesn't approach the record, so that's good, but nevertheless, areas here in Greenville in the next few days could be impacted. Moving on down the slides here in Hookerton, North Carolina. Now some of these show inundation areas. In this small community, most of the inundation, farmland, etc., adjacent to the creek. I don't even know how you say that. Continia Creek? I don't know. So that's not too impactful, not a big population area. But Goldsboro, that's a fairly big population area. I also have Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. And the Neuse River here could flood all these areas you see in blue to various depths, including the end of the runway at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. So big impacts here, 31 feet. This will be just shy of that at 30 feet. The water treatment plant at Smithfield could be impacted, and then evacuation of some homes in the Marmac area, and possibly Buckhorn Island, etc. I mean, this is just ongoing well after the storm has passed. Kinston, now this one's going to be major here. This has the potential to be the flood of record here, and we're talking about Friday. I mean, it's Sunday right now, and so long after Matthew fades and we're talking about politics again, or what have you. I'm certainly not talking about politics, but you get the idea. This is going to be unfolding in Kinston, all right? And you got Highway 70 that goes through there. And this is a larger town that we're talking about here, and they were impacted substantially by Hurricane Floyd 17 years ago. Northeast Cape Fear River near Chinkapin, shy of the record flood, thank goodness, but at 21 feet roughly, 20.9, pretty wide area of flooding in here, including parts of Chinkapin itself. And that starts to get into the major flood stage by tomorrow. And that runs through, peaking on Wednesday. All right, so just moving on, Waccamaw River near Conway. Last year, flooded bad there. Again this year, about a little under a foot below the record. And then all kinds of impacts in here. 9 confirmed fatalities as of this morning from the Emergency Support Function 6 update. If you know emergency management, you know what that means. That's just not good. I mean, I would just, if we could ever get it to 0, that'd make me real happy. And I mean that. It's just tragic, especially when we see how these people died. And we'll talk about that later too, because we need to learn from these and get that number to 0. We're not going to get damage to 0, and we can mitigate, but then there's just all kinds of different technical things here in this FEMA briefing. I'm going to post a link to the briefing on Twitter, so follow @HurricaneTrack on Twitter, and then by the time you see this video, the link will be posted, so check that out. So a lot to keep up with, and the hurricane season's not over. The model's indicating possibility of development in the Western Caribbean between now and the next 10 days, closer to the 10-day time frame. So we have plenty of time to watch that, but the water temperatures are still very warm west of about 80 degrees longitude, east of there too, but Matthew certainly stirred things up. Tomorrow I'll go into more in-depth discussions on what to expect over the next couple of weeks, and reporting on what's happening in the aftermath of Matthew. For now, I'm going to go up to Smithfield if I can get there. That's along I-95. There's some flooding. I want to try to fly my quadcopter, get some aerial video. I don't call it a drone. I will refuse that for the next 100 years if I have to. Drones are totally different. It's a quadcopter. That's technically what it's called. And I'm going to put it in the air and just get a little aerial shots of the flooding, and then maybe place a camera in Smithfield to stream live for the next 30 hours or so. And then my focus from there, I think, is going to be on Kinston. And that's a longer duration flood, so I got to figure out how to cover that, since it's going to take a few days for that water to rise. So stay tuned. I'll be keeping these video discussions coming, and also updates on social media, mainly via Twitter. That is my social media tool of choice. All right, have a great rest of your Sunday morning. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com, and I'll have another video discussion for you starting tomorrow.